And there's a lot to look at, a lot to discuss. And to be honest with you, I mean, seriously, when we look at the magnitude of tonight, seeing all three NBA playoff games, players on strike, boycotting the games to bring awareness to what happened in Wisconsin and what's been happening, not just this year, but for centuries. There is definitely a need for a message to be sent. And before we even look at what happened specifically and what can happen moving forward, just because everything gets misconstrued and misunderstood, because now we do live in a world where if you don't agree or if you actually bring up something opposite, then you are looked at as that. And I'm not here to determine anything more than my own point of view. And I am pro what's going on tonight. I recognize the need for players to use their platform, and I respect and honor players using their platform. This is not about ratings. This is not about advancing to the second round. This is not about basketball. Clearly, it's not about basketball. The issue that I have is, how do we get people to listen? How do we I can see people on Twitter listen, re-quoting the tweets from Shams and others about it. Listen, how do we go away from our echo chamber and actually get people who this boycott is intended for to listen? How do we avoid tomorrow morning on this very channel, the morning drive host, who is very successful, getting on and saying, this is why nobody watches the NBA, and downplaying everything that is done tonight as a result of ratings, as a result of, well, people aren't watching anyway. My fear is that the message, and this is not just NBA players boycotting tonight. This is about everything from George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and again, you can go back to years ago. Amadou Diallo, you can go back as far as you would like. Every year, you're going to find examples of issues, deaths at the hands of police, for example, something that is being protested, boycotted, and brought to the front of everybody's attention, if you will, tonight. The problem that we have, and we would be people that agree, people that are supporting this boycott, people that are tweeting to their 100 or 100,000 followers, however many you have, responding with the quote tweet like, yes, fist, listen, the typical words you would see. How do we get away from the echo chamber? I put a tweet out right away. 4 people, the first 4 people that responded, well, they should give their money back. Talk to me about China. The typical talking points you get whenever LeBron or another NBA player speaks up was, well, your ratings suck. Give back your money. You're lucky that you're playing a game, or something to do with China. And that is derailing the message. That is taking away the focus of the message. We saw this in the NFL. We saw how the discussion about Colin Kaepernick was never, outside of like the first week, it was never about why he was protesting. It was about the means or method of him protesting. And then it got hijacked. Across the board, it was hijacked about whether or not somebody should kneel with the anthem or just stand and use their platform and do something else to push for change. That's what the conversation was about, whether or not you should kneel, and people kneeling and players kneeling. Everything is removed, one step or two removed. People are trying to do that again. Well, this is why the ratings suck. You never said anything about China. The problem is, and this is the problem in our society, I imagine it's happening elsewhere. I do. I imagine that this is something that is happening outside of this country as well. But to focus just on the United States, this is the biggest problem we have. Instead of social media being a component of life, instead of social media like Twitter, for example, being a side piece for life, it is now taken over. The mentality that you have when you go on Twitter has taken over how you now see and interact with the world, for better or worse. But messages are lost on Twitter because some egg account that has no pic nor real name attached to it can just bash you back, and that's it. And what do? Sometimes, if you have the time and energy, you'll fight back, and it just becomes an argument. Or other times, you'll simply mute. And the mute button, the block button on social media has now permeated into our society. And this is the crux of the issue that needs to be discussed as players and other people of power and influence continue to push for change, continue to use their platform for change. If people were readily available to listen simply because there was a threat of money being lost, we wouldn't be in this position. I know it's idealistic and optimistic for some to think, well, you start messing with people's money and then change will happen. But how much change has truly happened since the murder of George Floyd? How much change has truly happened since the murder of Breonna Taylor? How much change has truly happened since the murder of Amadou Diallo? Things happen. They're cyclical. People get a platform. People push that platform. The right people, meaning the people who agree with it, are there to listen. You don't have to convince me, Kyrie Irving. You don't have to convince me, Giannis. You don't have to convince me, Pascal Siakam. I believe in your fight. I recognize the need for the fight. And I'm not alone. I don't stand out as unique or special in that regard. I recognize the need for you to push this message. But I'm not Clay Travis. And I'm not the hundreds of thousands of people who will repeat and mimic his talking points on the morning show and then shove it back down whoever seems to be trying to raise awareness's throat. Well, look, your ratings suck, and that's why I shouldn't care about your message. I guarantee you that's coming tomorrow morning on this very channel. Now, this is the beauty of it. We can disagree, and I can fire off, and I can give you my point of view, just like others who disagree will give theirs. But we have to understand when we sit there on social media, it's not us anymore pushing the mute or block button. It's people who have already changed the channel. It's people who have already have it ingrained in their mind that the NBA's ratings are down, the product sucks. Why would I watch it in the first place? That is the person who needs to see and hear and change their point of view based on what the players are pushing tonight. 3 straight games boycotted, out. You don't have games tonight in the NBA. How long will this last? Will the bubble last? I already saw multiple tweets saying they will be rescheduled. That's another one, too. You know, I think, and JJ, let me know if that's any better, please. But I think that where we are right now is no longer, like, this is the ideal situation for me, is to move now away from the echo chamber. I'm not going to sit here for 2 hours and reinforce what Pascal Siakam, what Giannis, what Kyrie and LeBron and countless of others have said, because I've talked about it for a while, and I am not going to just repeat the echo back to the chamber. What I would love to do is focus on people who have a problem with tonight, who truly have an issue, but can talk about it. And you know what? Sometimes you're just going to deal with somebody who's a jerk. Sometimes you're going to deal with somebody who is probably worse than that, a term much worse than that I can't say due to FCC regulations, but you're just going to deal with that. And you can choose at that point how to combat it. Are you going to sit down? And you don't have to do either or any of these. I'm just saying at some point, one of the two is going to truly have to happen, because my fear tonight is not that people won't accept it. I know countless people who have already been pushing the same message that aren't celebrities, that don't have blue checks next to their name, that have been victims of police violence or bigotry, have been victims of it to the point in which it's been something that's more not just mental, but physical as well. I'm not the person. They aren't the people that this message, that this boycott is intended for. How do we make sure the message lands? How do we make sure that this boycott is not the equivalent of the tweet that says, well, if anybody has a problem with fill in the blank, then you're part of the problem? How many people that are following or saw that account retweeted that tweet into their timeline that are part of the problem, that do have a problem with tonight, coming back and saying, you know what, stranger, internet stranger, you're right. You're right. I had a problem with this until I saw your tweet, until somebody I followed retweeted that into my timeline. Now I recognize I was wrong. That's not how social media works. In fact, that's not how this country works. We are beyond divided. This is no longer about division. This is about a fundamental change and difference in point of view. What Doc Rivers said last night, how many people who disagreed with Doc were even watching? We're even paying attention. And here's the kicker in all of it. None of this should stop. Doc Rivers shouldn't stop. Boycott shouldn't stop. Players using their platform shouldn't stop. It doesn't mean that simply because it's falling on the wrong ears, meaning the people who already agree with you, and not the deaf ears, meaning people who disagree with you, that you should stop the message. What we have to find out is a way in which we can connect with people who don't see it. Find a way in which we can connect that message to ears who don't see it, who don't get it, who look at this tonight like it's a farce, who look at this tonight like, give your money back, who look at this tonight like, well, you should have been saying something on China and Hong Kong, and then I would care about you. It's all a farce. It's all a way for them to hit the mute button in real life, for them to hit the block button in real life, to avoid having a real conversation about this. And let me tell you this, social media is not the place to have these types of conversations. They're not. Just look at the responses. Look at what you're seeing out there. Look at how these conversations are on social media. And then realize that we are way closer to living in Twitter than Twitter just being an escape. We are far closer to Facebook and Twitter being a mirror of our real life than the opposite, which is, man, I can't take this anymore. Let me go on Twitter and just have a little escape. Forget sports being an escape. Sports stopped being an escape a long time ago. Some people just refuse to listen. See? Now, has it changed? Have the people who were railing on Kaepernick, and we know for a fact they were lying when they said they were stopped watching the league. Nobody stopped watching the NFL. But the NFL casts the widest net. The NFL truly is the sport where the players get screwed over the most and heard the least. The NBA is a way more homogenous league like the NHL is. And in fact, this grouping together and then ultimately execution of the boycott by the three teams tonight and possibly tomorrow as well should not come as a surprise to anybody, including those who don't like it, including those who disagree with what's going on tonight. We have to be better in understanding that simply reinforcing the message, simply retweeting it, or you're damn right as a response to, if anybody isn't upset, or if anybody, pardon me, is upset about what's happening tonight, more so than the unarmed killing of a black male in this country by police, you're part of the problem. The response is, you're right, absolutely, 50,000 retweets. How do we reach the person that mutes that account? How do we reach the person? How do we reach the industry? How do we reach the business? How do we reach the money? You think that businesses that are bigoted to the point in which they would not stomach what the NBA is doing have already joined in? Like, do you think sponsors right now, honestly, do you think sponsors of the NBA are not prepared for this, are not understanding of where the NBA is and the plight that the players are representing, the community that the players are representing? And a quick little aside, as much as others, maybe the radio host to the Twitter account, if you're not part of the community that is being represented, you don't get a choice. You don't get a choice in the matter of who represents that community. Do you understand? Just like your community. Whatever community you belong to, you get to choose who represents that community. So if it's a rich athlete that's representing a community that doesn't reflect at all that type of level of income, and you say, well, what do you know? You're just some rich athlete. You don't get to choose. You don't get to decide who people in a community want to represent them. And if you don't like the fact that LeBron James is representing hundreds of millions of people that will never see the amount of money and wealth that he has, if you're not part of that community that's being represented by LeBron, you don't get to choose. And it flips around. It works for every community. It works for every small subset of culture and humanity in this country. That's it. That's the only thing I want to know. And I'm not asking this as a question. I'm trying to figure it out like you're trying to figure it out. I don't need to be told the same thing over and over and over again because I recognize the importance of saying it over and over and over again. I understand it and I believe it. It's part of my point of view. It's part of my worldview, is recognizing that there is a gross inadequacy right now when it comes to wealth, when it comes to justice, when it comes to being able to walk outside, the feelings that people have. I get that there are plenty of people in this country who are afraid this might be the last time they breathe if, in fact, they get pulled over by the police. There are others who will look at somebody's record. There are others and look at, well, was he resisting? Did she resist? You see, that's the Twitter response. Somebody, blue check, who million followers, puts out a pretty obvious statement, which is, do you now see the issues that fill in the blank, in this case, Black America is going through? And what do you get? You get 9 out of 10 people who follow that account saying, absolutely, we understand, we get it, we get it. And you even have people who agree that don't necessarily look like the community in peril, but full on agree, pushing and saying, well, what more can I do? What more can I do? What you can do is turn around to the people that look like you, that you share communities with, that are flying flags of the opposite party, for example, and then start to have a conversation, because there's really one of two ways in which you can handle this thing. You can either start punching people or worse, or you can sit down and have a conversation. But the person who needs to see what happened tonight, the person who needs to be impacted the most about what happened tonight, 3 games boycotted in the NBA, players going on strike to raise awareness. You need to raise your own awareness. Are you doing that? Is there anybody, and I'm not downplaying, you see, it's going to be looked at as, well, Shannon, what do you want? You don't want them to do? Of course I want them to speak, and of course I want them to use their platform. I want to make sure that it's landing on the right people's ears. I want to make sure that the message is not just being retweeted in life by the hundreds of thousands or millions of people who already agree. We need to find a way to start convincing people who disagree that they have the wrong point of view, or at the very least, be open to a different point of view. Certain things aren't going to be as easy as other conversations. Certain conversations, you may look at somebody and say, well, this person is lost. If you're going to come on your own platform, for example, and rail against the boycotting tonight simply because the NBA's ratings were down and you're going to draw some correlation, or you're waiting to pounce on any NBA player who boycotted tonight and hit them up with, well, what about China? Or you haven't been watching anyway. Think about that. How many people that need to see this message, that need to hear the message that players are sending tonight, are even watching the NBA? Would it not stand to reason that there are millions of people in this country, even some with influence and a position of power, mind you, like maybe a morning drive radio show, that could stand to sit back and reflect and think to themselves, you know what? There is something more than just my own personal point of view. How do we get that person to change their mind? How do we get the hundreds of thousands of people listening or watching or following along to change their minds? I promise you this, you cannot vote this mentality out. As much as we may want to, and we may sure as hell try to, you cannot vote this mentality out. The people who have this mentality, who support the mentality that NBA players are bad, NBA players are jealous, are selfish, whatever it may be, they, first and foremost, I don't even think are watching the NBA, which is a shame because the message is being sent loud and clear. But also, they're not interested in changing their point of views. They're not. So what are we doing? Are we reinforcing the same thing to people in our echo chamber without truly figuring out a way in which to convince other people that don't agree? How do you get rid of the person on Twitter who responds to every single tweet, every single arrest the cops who murdered Breonna Taylor tweet with some sort of video of a protest turned into a riot or something along those lines to counter the message? How often do you see that? That's what's happening in real life. Again, social media has now become a mirror of real life. It's crazy to think of that. It really is. If you've ever seen Black Mirror, there's an episode, White Christmas, in which the technology, and that, I'm just waiting for the technology to come out, where you essentially have it on your phone, and instead of being able to mute or block a contact, you still have people that, you know, you could mute in real life. And it's great. The episode is beyond intelligent. It's one of the smartest, if not the smartest shows on television. And that's where we are right now. We're only missing the technology to where people would rather go around and mute somebody who disagrees and mute somebody who brings up China or brings up selfishness or brings up rich, spoiled athlete. It's just easier to mute. And look, to be fair, they're muting us. They are. Drumheller, Black Mirror. You know that episode, brother. You know exactly the one I'm talking about. Where you have the mute and the block. Like the guy who, in the first one where they had, and I'm not going to go into specifics of the episode, I don't need to, but basically what you have is the technology to make that person muted in society. And you can't see them. They're talking to you, but their whole picture is distorted. And not picture on a screen, but picture in real life. And their voice sound... Can't hear them. I mean, the idea, think about when this episode even came out years ago, and that's really where we are right now. How do we push people that disagree into having an honest, open conversation? You know, we should probably even start there. Talking about an open, honest conversation in which somebody who disagrees with the NBA players is willing to come to the table and admit that they may not be right. Do you realize how hard that is right now in this society? Do you realize how difficult this is right now in our society? You know, that's the problem, isn't it? Now, explain yourself, Woody Hayes Fist, because I'm not going to read that comment until you explain it. I'll put it out there for others to see. But I imagine that you're not interested in having a conversation. And if you're not interested in having a conversation, then we need to recognize that you may not and others may not be willing to change their point of view. And if you're not willing to change your point of view, then you don't need to weigh in on it. And that works always. That works with multiple issues. But I'm focused on one tonight, and that's NBA players boycotting 3 straight games and possibly more. At Shander Show, twitch.tv/Shander Show is how you get me. You can follow along on all of the platforms. We'll talk about one of the most amazing and fascinating ways in which you can win money via DFS. Coming up next, our pal Ira back from Overlay DFS. Trying to track down Brian Compton at 7 o'clock. He might be wrapped up in press conferences, so we may either have to push that back until next week or also discuss it with Brian maybe a little bit later in the show. But I want you to think about that. I want you to understand something, at least where I sit right now. I agree with the message. I agree with the platform being used in this way, and I agree with the boycott. How do we get people who disagree? How do we get people who are just waiting to pounce on this with ratings and China and other issues? Oh, well, black on black, like this myth that nobody gives a damn about black on black crime and only for police. Well, look, I don't necessarily agree with that by any means. And I think Woody Hayes Fist on Twitch that you don't have any evidence at all to that point. There is nothing at all. Do you realize how many videos have you seen Philando Castile? Do you realize how many videos of people caught on film not resisting arrest were still hit with police brutality or worse. So for you and others out there asking why aren't more black celebrities talking about not resisting arrest, that to me says that you aren't paying attention. Are you willing? My question to you is, are you willing to pay attention? Are you willing to admit that you might be wrong? If you're not willing to admit that, then I don't know what you're looking for from our society and from our issues. Are you looking to just keep the status quo? How can we fix that? How can we get people who disagree with an obvious statement that you and I agree on to, at the very least, admit to themselves, you know what, I might be wrong? Do you honestly think in the hours that Clay Travis is going to break the mic tomorrow morning, admit at all he could be wrong about his point of view, that the NBA is just a bunch of spoiled babies and that's why the ratings are gone? Because ever since they went and pushed political issues and social issues, nobody cares anymore. Is that going to be the norm? Are you waiting for another Jason Whitlock article, but in this case, not attacking LeBron James, but actually coming out and saying, you know what, maybe I was wrong. Even the words maybe, possibly are out. They're out of the picture. You can't show any presumed weakness to your own echo chamber because they'll kick your ass out, and now you're associated with the other side. I'm beyond, at this point, words and emotion, because I recognize that there are people that are fighting a fight much harder and much more passionate than I am. But I also recognize that the intended message is not falling on the right ears. How do we change that? We'll talk with Ira, Overlay DFS. It's an awesome thing that we're promoting this fall with the NFL as well. Coming up next, try and track down Brian Compton as well. I don't know right at this point because of all the press conferences. And yes, we'll touch on the Flyers as well. This is my 2 hours, and I'm going to sprinkle in some other things that are important to sports, and the biggest thing that goes beyond sports. There you go. Yes, there are more videos of shootings without. You just haven't seen them, or you haven't been there for the community that has experienced it. Trust me. We can listen collectively. Woody Hayes Fist. You clearly disagree with me, and in the purposes of these 2 hours, that's okay. You're not trolling. You want to hear me out, bro? I appreciate that. Let's have this conversation. But I would demand that part of the research in this conversation is to talk to people who have experienced it and not just write it off. I'm not saying you're doing that specifically, but I'm saying people who choose to just write it off as that person was resisting arrest. What was he reaching for? There is a major, we are missing steps. We are truly missing steps for somebody reaching for something under his seat with 3 police officers directly behind him to being shot 7 times in the back. There are steps that are missing to that point. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance. Okay, let me give you Did the mic sound better? Okay. Thank you. So I was doing. No. That's fine. We can keep it. We can keep it like a longer, like a typical 3. Thank you, brother. God damn it. It's the same fucking shit every time on this stupid Twitch, man. I swear. It keeps moving me back from sports to podcasting. Every time, and I have to go in there and change it. Thank you, sir. Woo, I am drenched. Yeah. That took a lot out of me, man. Well, thank you. I wasn't looking for validation, but I was just saying. No, no, and I've been having them a long time, man. Back on the Fanatic, and gotta call Clay out though, you know. Were you able to grab Ira? Oh, sweet, thanks. Well, we've been telling you about everything going on with an amazing app where you can win money easy. This is the beauty of Overlay DFS, and that's the app at Overlay DFS, of course, on Twitter. And we bring back our man Ira, who talks everything, both with the fantasy app as well as give us a little help. Now, the NBA, we're not going to have anything in the NBA, but I'm sure Ira has a couple of baseball plays, maybe even a hockey play or two tonight. But first and foremost, Ira joining us on the Dr. Glatt Regrow Your Hairline. Dr. Paul Glatt, Philadelphia's leading hair restoration doctor. My man, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and hope all is well with you and yours. Absolutely, man. And it's clearly not a typical night, as normally you and I would be talking about the three NBA games at length. But clearly, there are bigger issues going on than sports, and the NBA made us aware of that. And I imagine that it's something, regardless of who or where you are, from a fantasy to a betting, and this show and this channel is all about betting. But we could all stop and at least recognize the importance of a movement like this. Absolutely right. Yeah, and this is the one benefit of the bubble, just to trail on your point there, is that you don't have 20 or 16 teams in the playoffs spread out in different cities. You actually have everybody connected in one area in Orlando, in one big room, if you will. So we'll kind of wait and see and what happens there. as far as anything moving forward. We already know that the Raptors and Celtics as well talking about this. So there are a ton of different groups of teams, if you will, that have talked about this moving forward. And we'll see, in fact, if we get any NBA back anytime soon. As far as overlay is concerned, things roll on, and there are tournaments for different sports. I even jumped in on the golf earlier this week. Just to explain, because we talk about it a lot, and now to have you on, it's much easier for you to explain the benefits of playing in this as opposed to your typical DFS. And the best thing that I love about it is you guys have revolutionized the start sit to a simply winning money, and that's awesome. Mm. Woo. That's the best part is you're always in. And that's what I love about it is, if you're playing one game on one of these, tournaments, these captain leagues things, you might have to wait for that. But with overlay, it not only do you have guys on the same team, like for example, and I'll use the NBA example, it could be Embiid versus Simmons, right? And you have to choose who has the better night, but you're in it throughout the night. So you can set it and forget it and watch all these games and know that you're locked in, especially baseball or at, something like that, which would start at, let's say, 6 o'clock and roll through, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. It's amazing to be able to be in every one of these games, knowing that there are players spread throughout the night. That's awesome, Ira. So speaking of that, you can go 12-0 and you can win the jackpot. And didn't we have somebody win the NBA jackpot recently? Unbelievable. That's amazing. That is awesome. And you also have at Overlay, we're chatting with Ira at Overlay DFS. You also have the opposite. And I forget the number of how many I need to lose in a row in order to the slump buster. But that's something like you think DraftKings or FanDuel, you think any of these other places are going to hit you with the slump buster? Can you explain that to the audience? 20. It's amazing. That alone is reason to jump in. Again, the app is Overlay DFS. It's so simple to sign up. I tweet about it a ton, show you the screenshots of the tournaments that I'm in. It's easy. Like you don't need anything more than a basic appreciation and general knowledge of who each person, because you're already making the decision for me by creating the lineup. So I don't have to go mine and figure out dollar signs and work under I can't work under my own budget. Now I need to work under a DraftKings budget. This is why Overlay is king. It's awesome, Ira, and we thank you for that. Now I do need to get your thoughts on anything tonight that you might be playing, be it on the ice or on the diamond. Ooh. Now, do you have anything for the two games tonight? Because look, if you're riding this hot streak on the ice, who am I to not trail it, right? Yes. Right. Right. Awesome stuff. At Ira Silver Magic is how you can follow Ira Silver. Hoopball Gaming, Overlay DFS. Appreciate it, brother. We'll chat again next week. Thank you so much for the time and, of course, the plays as I put down everything. So if you lose anything tonight, you can come back and blame me. I'm the reason, all right? I'm the cooler. You got it, brother. Thank you. That's Ira Silver at Ira Silver Magic on the Dr. Glatt Regrow Your Hairline. Dr. Paul Glatt, Philadelphia's leading hair restoration doctor. At Shander Show for me on Twitter, twitch.tv/Shander Show. We'll be back right here. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance. All right, so what do you want to do? Okay, so let's run that. Wait, I'm sorry. Can you do that one more time? Okay, that's fine. I can do a quick segment. That's fine. I don't know. I'm going to send him a Man, here we go with the Phillies. I don't know if I'm ahead. I just saw. Yeah, Hoskins, right? But that tied it, didn't it? Yeah. Just put that on. Next week, I got 11-1, and then I'm filling in, hopefully, with a former Eagle, 3-6 for Tony Bruno on Sirius. And then I'm doing this show, 6-8. So, yeah. I might not have a voice on Monday, just so you know. So, I figure. Yeah, I mean, I don't, All right, quick segment. We'll be back for the second hour. Again, trying to track down Brian Compton. No promises as this thing went to overtime. Phil Myers with the game winner. We also have live baseball action. Now, the Milwaukee Brewers have boycotted the game tonight, so they will not play. And any bets, I had a bet in for the NBA tonight. It was voided. So I imagine that even with a reschedule, I don't know, John Jansen, of course, is producing. He'll be with you an hour and 7 minutes from now, hosting the line change. You were with Brace earlier on the Daily Ticket. Man, this is a busy, long ass day for you. Is this just a regular day in John Jansen's life? Aren't you glad you moved back up this way? Weren't you down in DC? Now, you probably are not too far from the studio, knowing that you're there for 12 hours a day, right? Are you adding more to your commute and your day? Got it. So you switch up depending on where you are. Smart man. Smart man. See, I knew that you were smarter than the rest of us here. I don't want to speak for Rob, but you're smarter than me. Probably Sean too. But again, all right. So did you see? You guys were on live, and I know that there was so much going on, rightfully so. And we'll go back to this when we come back in hour two. The latest coming out from the NBA. But the Flyers were able to bounce back, and we just had Ira Silver on from Overlay DFS, and he made the point that we all have seen up close here in personal in Philadelphia, but maybe others are not aware of, and that's there's just one thing that you can count on in the Philadelphia Flyers season, and that's if they lose, they ain't losing again, meaning back to back. Like this is unbelievable. It's as uncanny as how difficult it is for the Philadelphia Flyers to be beaten 2 straight games as it is for the Philadelphia Phillies bullpen to hold a lead. Does that make sense? Now, we're almost at the point, thanks to Rhys Hoskins tying this up, we're almost at the point where we can fade the Phillies. Now, that did not work last night. That was the first time, I think, that must have snapped like a 10, 11-game streak in which fading the Phillies after they got up, despite what the result was at the end, win or loss, you would fade the Phillies and you'd make some money. Last night, they got you. Last night was the one in which you look up and think, man, you can't win them all. But at the very least, you had something there. I'm waiting a little bit now to see if, in fact, it doesn't work if the Phillies are down. The Phillies are down. You might as well just play the Phillies knowing that they've got some offense and they can put up some runs. But we'll keep an eye on this. It's 1-1 right now. We are in the bottom of the third, so the Nats are up at the plate. And outside of the Rhys Hoskins home run, who's actually been on I don't want to say a tear, but maybe like a mini little tear right here. Jays up 1-0 over the Sox. O's up 2-0 over the Rays. I did play that Ira pick tonight. I don't know what you thought of that, because this is not a typical pitcher that the San Francisco Caplers are going up against. They have to knock off Kershaw. They're plus 1.5 at plus 114. The Giants are on the run line, and then plus 190 on the money line. So I threw it. Look, Ira's been hot, so I'll tail it until he falls. But that was the tough one. The hockey games I could swallow. That was betting on Gabe Kapler tonight to beat the Dodgers was a tough one, John. That's fair. I think that is fair. Are you? Yes, it does. That's a good point. If you're hovering around 500 in this short season, it's been pretty difficult to get a read on you. All right, we'll come back the second hour. We'll update you on stuff you can bet on. We'll explain why you can't bet on the NBA in case you missed it. Busy second hour here at Shandor Show, twitch.tv/Shandor Show. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance. Nice. I saw Houston now too, right? Um, are the Yankees and Braves playing that second game tonight? It looks like they are, right? So I have Milwaukee, Cincy out, and Houston and the Angels out, right? Okay, real quick, Brian 40. So why don't we kind of reverse the hour, right? I'll do the two breaks before. Okay, so maybe break at like 7:15 or 7:20 and then again at like 35. You tell me what's easiest for you. Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's if you can make it like 4. Doesn't have to be 5, but 4 minutes is cool. So I'll break at 7:15 and like float somewhere between 15 and 20 and then again at 35. All right, sweet. I just sent you on DM Brian's number too. All right, so we have confirmation. We'll chat with Brian Compton tonight at 7:40. So we'll close the show down with Brian. Now Brian was the former deputy manager, pretty much editor, deputy managing editor for the NHL. He writes for NHL.com now for the Islanders. He covers all things for the Islanders. But Brian has been atop the NHL covering this league for a long time. And I wanted to get his thoughts on this series ahead of time as the Islanders were up 1-0. But tonight seemed like a good opportunity following that game. As far as what's happening in our world, as far as what's happening with the fallout now of the NBA boycotts, Major League Baseball seems to be following suit. Now, there are two storylines that follow from the NBA boycott, which, in my opinion, as you heard in the first hour, is a necessary move. We need to see people who disagree with it, people who have a problem with it, people who fight back and say, well, I would love for fill in the blank. Why is it Marcus Smart upset about black on black crime? Anything and anything from that to the ratings are bad, and this is why the ratings are bad, to, well, what about Hong Kong and China? Whoever holds the opposing point of view, progress is at least getting them to understand that they could be wrong. As soon as you have that opening, then it's on us. It's on us to kick the door through and explain what went wrong, explain why the point of view is distant from the person who is talking. I recognize the importance and I support the importance of boycotting tonight. I don't know why somebody would have a problem with the NBA boycotting tonight? Why? What's wrong? And I'm asking, what at Shander Show, twitch.tv/Shander Show, what is being taken away from you tonight that is unbearable? What is being taken away and removed from your life tonight that is so unbearable that you can't stop and listen to a message? Even if you disagree with the message, why can't you sit there and at least open up? Is anybody being beat up? Is anybody being thrown down the stairs? Is anybody being murdered? Is anything happening in such a sense of violence? No, it's actually to bring awareness to the violence. But I am curious, as this statement that's being made by the NBA, what is taken away from you that you have to be so hurt to not even open up the possibility in your own mind that you could be wrong, that you might be wrong, that your point of view of, well, shut up, spoiled athlete, and just go out and do what we pay you to, or the league in this case, ticket holders and sales and everything else. What is really being altered in your life that you can't sit down and at least listen to what's being discussed? It becomes, I think, problematic in life if you refuse to honestly accept your own point of view and your own worldview without opening up the idea that you could be wrong. That you could be wrong. Now, we're seeing baseball right now push, as I saw this tweet from James Nouveau. It looks like Jason Hayward is sitting out as protest of the Jason Blake shooting, but the Cubs are moving on. Now, again, this is a team decision. If you want to vilify somebody for not boycotting or not stopping what they're doing, then I think you owe it to them and you owe it to the team and you owe it to the league to listen to why. We're trying, the people that are already agreeing with and accepting the NBA boycott are trying to move away from predetermined assumptions, from predetermined jumps to conclusions. So we owe it to these teams. We owe it to Major League Baseball teams that are going on and playing tonight. If that's the Cubs minus a big name in Hayward, then we owe it for an explanation. You may not like the explanation and it may not change your mind, but that's what we're asking those people who are just ready to fire off tomorrow morning on their radio shows or anywhere else around the country that, well, the NBA has bad ratings because of this stuff. And you shouldn't care about what LeBron or anybody else does because the ratings suck, which is a lie. The ratings don't suck. They might have seen a dip from years prior, but everything about ratings is always compared to years prior in the same sport. You're not going to compare the NBA and NHL ratings because the NBA is doing better. It always does better. Teams that have already boycotted and postponed tonight as a result, we've got the Angels-Astros game and the Reds-Brewers game. I don't know if other teams, I don't know if the Giants and Dodgers are going to fall suit there and fall in line and follow that same practice. I don't know if the Rockies and D-backs are going to do the same. Mariners, Padres, Royals, Cardinals, A's, Rangers. Coming up in a matter of minutes, expected to be the Twins and Indians, Cubs and Tigers. We already heard about the Cubs with Hayward. Marlins, Mets. We are watching as we speak the Phillies and Nationals. Yankees and Braves expected to play the second game of their doubleheader on ESPN tonight. So I understand that people are looking similarly at situations that either they respect and they appreciate and they honor versus the opposite, which they don't want to listen. And there are different means, and there are different levels to it. I'm not equating anything together. But what I am saying is, if you are on the side of the NBA players, and if you recognize the importance and the gravity of this movement and how important it is to show solidarity and boycott the games tonight, then you owe it to other teams and you owe it to other leagues to offer their own explanation. I'm not saying that you should agree with it, but I'm saying that you should open your mind and at least understand or try to understand why. Try to hear why. It's the same thing you and I are asking for those people that refuse to push back, refuse to accept what's happening tonight. It's a similar situation, different means, completely different means to a similar end. And part of me understands that it's difficult. And I get it's difficult for you. I get that it's not easy to watch NBA players put their reputation and their career, if it may be, or their ability to market and anything along those lines. I understand that it's difficult to see them take such a big risk in doing that and not see other sports fall in line. To see that the NHL is moving on, to see that baseball is moving on. Twins and Indians, top of the first. Not everybody is going to do this tonight. Not everybody's going to do it tomorrow. It doesn't take away, and this is, again, none of this is easy. None of this stuff is easy. These conversations, if they were easy, then we would have already had solutions. Some of it seems easy. Some of it seems pretty simple. But a lot of it is not when you get to the back and forth in the discourse. So if, in fact, let's say that tweet is accurate, Jason Hayward sitting out tonight's game as protest and his Cubs teammates are not, then we need to understand what types of conversations are going on. What types of conversations happened? What's at risk? Brewers have already decided to not play the game. Reds have agreed not to play as well. No forfeit situation. Both teams have agreed to sit out tonight's game. That's from Jared Diamond. Just because they do it and the NBA players do it doesn't mean that everybody is going to do it, despite you out there may thinking that everybody should do it. In fact, if anything, it shows that people are not actually looking at it similarly, and they have their own issues at hand and that they're dealing with. Again, I'm not putting any moral value on that decision. Not at all. What I am saying is you have to understand that there are people that are playing a game, for example, and honestly thinking to themselves that this is about a sacrifice and this is about me making it up there and teams playing for something. I don't know what's going on in the NHL right now as far as the mentality of it. I saw a statement that was released. Maybe it comes up. Maybe it came up tonight after the Islanders-Flyers game. We'll chat with Brian Compton in 30 minutes about that. I don't know if Tampa Bay and Boston sat there and discussed this. I don't know if Colorado and Dallas sat there and discussed this. I'm not going to jump to that conclusion because I'm tired of people on the other side of where I stand on the NBA boycotting tonight being happy and supportive of that. I am tired of other people jumping to the conclusion that, well, this is just a matter of ratings. This is just a matter, the sport was dying in the bubble. So this was a way to regain some sort of popularity. That's an assumption. That's an assumption not based on many, if any, facts and evidence. And I can't do that with other teams. If the Blue Jays and Red Sox decided this is a game that we want to play, this is what we're here for, maybe it's a nice distraction. Maybe it's just a matter of we're getting paid to go out there. Maybe it's a matter of we've only played 30, maybe 28 to 30 games in a 60-game season, momentum, things along those lines. Or maybe it is what you think. Maybe it is guys sat around there and said, who cares? We're not going to boycott. I don't know, and you don't know. Much like we don't know what fueled this in the NBA, and if, in fact, there is something to do with ratings or other issues regarding it. I don't personally believe it. But we can't expect the people who disagree with us, we can't expect the people who refuse to change their point of view to then be on some other side of this, pro, let's say, O's and Rays playing, and not give the teams, not the people, but the teams, the benefit of that doubt to at least explain what's going on, to at least explain why they would do that, why they would continue to play. That's the difference. Now, I don't think that you can honestly look at anything specific and try and jump to some conclusion that the NHL is anti-boycott or anti-protest or anything along those lines. The NHL is doing something that they feel is necessary for the, I don't know, sacrifice and just to get to the playoffs. This hasn't been something that has been at the forefront of other sports like it's been in the NBA. So it would stand to reason that the NBA would lead the charge by doing this, by taking the night off and thinking about what could happen moving forward. That would be what's going on right now. That would be, I think, the easiest solution to trying to understand what's happening. And I saw Kurt Helin put something out, so I'm trying to get to that as well, about a report. Anything Kurt reports, we'll take it as gold here. But I imagine that you will see more of this in the NBA. And if basketball returns, it may not be for a little bit. Now, Heelan's report is this: sizable number of NBA players advocating for finishing the season. So even in its own internal turmoil, if you will, no sport is on the same page. That's why you can't vilify a league. Well, you know, the NHL, just a bunch of bigots going out there and playing through this. We don't know that. We don't know why the Cubs went out and played. We don't know why everything else happened where you saw sports continue while the NBA did not. Now, reading this from Kurt Helin, it actually came from Dan Feldman, who wrote it, quoting Chris Haynes of the level of aggregation. I apologize. Yahoo sources. This is Chris B. Haynes. There's a sizable amount of players advocating to finish the season out since sacrifices were made to enter the bubble, believing the NBA is a useful resource in this social climate. One-star NBA player, quote, "We're already here. Let's finish what we started." You know, maybe, just maybe, NHL players are thinking the same thing. Look at the level of sacrifice that we had to make to get into the bubble, much like NBA players, much like MLS players. To just remove it is a major statement, but it's also and recognizable and understanding by NBA players who took this risk, if you will, and it's a risk across the board, a risk that I commend and a risk that I support, but took this risk and thought, all right, we're doing something. We're making a statement. And then you realize that maybe not everybody is on board with this thing being more of a permanent thing as opposed to just a walk-off tonight, to bring awareness, to continue to bring heightened awareness. And I could see it already on Twitter. Mentions are full of people who are not interested in having a conversation. You know? That's it. That's a different, like, look, I put out a tweet, very simple tweet, quoting Shams earlier in the day. Good for them using their platform to push for change. Are the people who this is intended for listening? Have they already changed the channel? I hope not, but fear the opposite. At M. Kevin Bonner, whoever it was intended for, I hope they're not listening. Not to basketball players anyway. How do you change that person's mind? But it's not just some random person on Twitter with 28 followers. It's a CEO who's running a company. It is somebody of immense power and influence that has lobbying interests, that does influence the political and social spectrums. How do we change that person's mind? How do we get that person from Bonner to CEO Bonner? How do we get that person to actually sit down and think to themselves, I could be wrong? Because Twitter ain't it, folks. I promise you that. It's an old adage from years ago. The revolution will not be televised. It ain't going to happen on TV, and it sure as hell is not going to happen on Twitter. It's not going to happen on Twitter. It's not going to happen on TNT. It's not going to happen on Fox News. It's not going to happen on CNN. We'll sit and watch what could be seen and misconstrued as one, but it won't be the real one. The continued push to be heard is ignored. That is the fundamental problem in people who are refusing to listen. or refusing to understand what's going on right now. Because honestly, it's much easier to send a tweet out like that. It's much easier to just send a tweet and mute the conversation. How many people who should be waking up and responding to what's going on from the NBA have already muted the NBA on Twitter, have already changed the channel and not watched TNT for weeks, but are just repeating the stupid copy points pushed out by morning and other radio hosts that seem to have a major problem with the NBA and players in the NBA speaking up for issues that they believe in. I hate to break it to you, but NBA players are not hurting anybody with their messages. They're not. Nobody is being hurt. Your feelings might be hurt, but nobody is being hurt right now by the NBA doing this tonight. There isn't anybody who is physically being assaulted. There isn't anybody who is being shot. There isn't anybody who's being killed as a result of this tonight. This is about a conversation. Do you understand? Like the very basic principle of what's going on tonight is about a conversation. We tracked down Brian Compton. We'll chat about the Flyers Islander series and also get his thoughts on what, if anything, has been mentioned in the league regarding missing games. And I imagine that what you heard from Chris Haynes and others who have covered this league, like Kurt Heelan and Dan Feldman, who wrote this on NBC Sports, is going to be a similar feel throughout, especially for a team in a bubble, especially for the sacrifices that, do you understand? Look, it speaks twofold. First and foremost, it speaks to the type of sacrifice that NBA players made tonight by walking off and boycotting the games. They, like the other sizable amount of players, according to Chris B. Haynes' report from Yahoo, have made a significant sacrifice. The other part of it is we have to understand that this sizable amount of players advocating to finish the season out since sacrifices were made to enter the bubble, that from Chris B. Haynes, is not alone in bubble sports. It's not. The NHL is probably thinking the same thing. Phillies right now, bottom of the fourth, no outs. This could be the time. No outs. Men on first and second for the Nationals. And we are just waiting, patiently waiting to fade the Phillies. Brian Compton in 20 minutes. More from you at Shander Show, twitch.tv/Shander Show. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance. Thanks, buddy. Okay, thank you. I didn't see anything else. Mariners, Rockies, D-backs? Yeah, I mean, that I figured that was... Oh, is that right? Yeah. I mean, the thing about the WNBA is they have such a centralized and usually, they have such a centralized fan base, right? Like it's pretty centralized across the board. So it's an easy league for players and fans to be lockstep in. And I can't imagine that there's any even blowback, right? Which again, I mean, hey, they should. They have every right to, and they should do it. But it's just interesting because when you start to widen the net, like the NFL, for example, it's a mess. Wow. No volume on the produce. Can you hear the commercials, Bo? Can you hear? I'm talking to the stream. Sorry, John. Can you hear? You can't hear anything, huh? How much time do I have, John? Can you give me 90? Okay, thanks. How about now? Well, can you hear it now? I got to figure it out. Okay, John, I'm sorry. I'm good. Okay, thanks. Wait a second. Yeah, I'm here. Yep. So it looks like we have. What was the other game, John? It was the Mariners. Thank you. Thank you. So the Mariners now have postponed, and the Padres. And again, this is what it's no loss. It's no result right now. It doesn't go down as a forfeit. It's two teams taking off, and the WNBA has taken the night off as well. Phillies, mind you, are down 2-1 right now. Two outs, however, but men on first and third. If I can get one more run, I would take a good look at this run line. I just need one more right now to truly look at jumping and fading the Phillies. No, actually, it's too late. It's too late. What the hell am I talking about? This whole thing, serious stuff can really mess with your mind, right? I'm sitting there talking about fade the Phillies when the Phillies are up by 3 or 4 runs. They're about to go down by 3 or 4 runs. In fact, I might sneak in on the Phillies tonight. It's still way early, and I granted, the problem is that Aaron Nola might be chased out early. But, man, I think the way in which Rhys Hoskins has been playing, the way in which this offense can just put together a stretch of runs, maybe we do the opposite. Maybe what we do is we take, normally it would just be waiting and waiting and waiting. But maybe what we should do is just fade the Nats. Now, I have no problem. I mean, just how beautiful of a sentence is that? Fading the Nats. Well, that was a tough strike right there, but I'll take it all day. 2-1, bottom of the fourth, waiting for Aaron Nola to get out of this inning. And right now, as it's suspended, it's only a 1 run on the run line. A lot of R's right there. Now, I defer to you, John. How would you play this out right now? Because I guess there are two ways of looking at it. You can either, and this is assuming that the Phillies get out of the inning, but if they don't and the Nats get up, and let's say they put another run or two up, are you taking the Phillies? It's a 1-2 count right now. Are you taking the Phillies where you actually just saw Garcia steal second on top of that? So Soto and Garcia are on second and third, and Nats are doing everything they can to just stay alive. But it's a 1.5. Like, I can get the Phillies at +1, and I'm laying some juice. Granted, I'm laying some juice. I'm staying far away from the money line. I don't know what the hell's going to happen in this game money line wise, but I can get the Phillies at +1.5 at about -137. Do you look at it like that, jump in now, take the Phillies, or do you wait for the inevitable, which is the Nationals to get up a little bit, and maybe, just maybe, since it's a tight game, you know that you just kind of wait it out and see if the Phillies can battle back. And when it's tighter, even if the Phillies tie it with a big inning, that's when you can take the Nationals. Well, that's the money line. Are you brave enough to take the money line for the Phillies? Got it. Okay. So I think that makes the most. Now, see, I don't mind laying. We'll see what happens. Yeah, but you know it's going to go away, right? That's the thing. It's going to go away. Like, if the Phillies get, once the Phillies get out of this inning, that's probably going to drop to 1. Like, it's already off the board right now. So something happened. I'm ahead of it a little bit because I'm watching the game tracker on DraftKings, but that's the line that you kind of have to walk right now, which is, do you jump in at 1.5 down 1 and risk nothing extra happening in this inning, or do you lose it? And if you lose it at that point, it's back down to 1. Boy, it's +1 right now, -105. I could do that. Nola gets out of the inning. +1 at -105 is not a terrible bet, mind you. Boy, it's -190 if you want the hook. Whew. I'm not doing 2-1 just to get a hook right now for a team that could give up 6 more runs or put up. That's the craziness of it. It's like Tiger Woods. It's like a 4-round exhibition by Tiger Woods. The guy can shoot 68, 73, 68, 73. You don't know. You don't know what Tiger you're going to get right now, and that's really holding him back moving forward. He's going to need a gigantic week to move up in the FedEx and qualify for the Tour Championship. But that's kind of what the Phillies are. That's a pretty good, in my opinion at least, kind of pretty good analogy of what's going on with the Phillies. Now, I have a profit boost available, so I'm going to use that and now get the Phillies +1 at +106. That's something that's a gift horse. I can't look that gift horse in the mouth, Jansen. I have to take that. If I'm getting, yes. Okay. Now, look, the Phillies, this is the beauty of this team, is as much as they can give up 4 or 5 runs in any inning, especially when their bullpen's out, and Nola's still in. So I can't imagine that they're going to pinch hit for Nola anytime soon. It's just a matter of what you can get from this lineup now in the next 2 innings. And that would, I mean, they're in the 5th inning, heading to the 5th inning right now. And Nola gave up 2 runs. That's it. He gets out of a tight jam in order to extend it. So just looking at that alone, I'm confident. Now you got me thinking, though, about the money line. The money line's +1. I see it at DraftKings at +170. Oh. Yeah, but they could give that up. Don't, like, it's a balance, isn't it? Right. Okay. Okay. That would be key, I think. You're right. Plus 205 is where it's at right now. What the hell happened that it went plus 205? Were people pounding the Nationals? That moved 15 points in like 3 seconds. Wow. Okay. You know what? See, this is what again, I'll take the one run, but the 205 is definitely difficult to pass up. I'll do a half unit. I did a full unit on the plus one. I'm going to do a half unit on the money line. Is that okay? Okay. I was tempted to double down and do, but I'm saving this. Now, see, this is where we hedge. We hedge when the Phillies do give up those 6 runs, right? And then all of a sudden, things are going to look even worse for the Phillies. And you think, okay, well, if you can get the Phillies at like plus 5 or 6, and all you need is 1 inning to where they can turn things around, a nice little pop here from Scott Kingery wouldn't be bad by any means. So we'll wait and see. 2-1 right now, 1 out already. Top of 5. That's what happened, is we saw an out. That's what moved it. But it's already back down. See, this thing is fluctuating. 190, 210, 195 right now. There's no value in the Nationals across the board. 0 across the board. But think of this. The one thing that is interesting is that run line, the total runs, pardon me, has not really moved much. I think that there is this expectation from the book that some explosion is going to happen. It's 2-1 in the 5th. And that run line, pardon me, the total runs sit at 7.5. Now, again, you're not going to get an even or easy return on either. It's not like over 7.5 is plus 110. You're laying juice on both. DraftKings has that total runs at 7.5, and over is minus 113. Under is minus 117. This is going to be a long game. Maybe, just maybe, you can get lucky, as John said, and the Phillies can turn something like the next, maybe the 6th inning, 7th inning, turn that into something, get up. But that's where I think we start to hedge. That's the ideal scenario, right? Is the Phillies right now, +1 money line play, get up in the next 2 innings, let's say 5-2. Big inning. They're up 5-6-2. We already know Nola's pushing it, might get pulled, ain't going to pitch the complete game. That's just not going to happen. So it's only a matter of time before the Nationals have an opportunity, and that's where I jump in Washington +4, +5, even if it's a 4.5, something along those lines. That wouldn't be a bad play. That's the ideal scenario. Anytime the Phillies get up early, you can take them, and also recognize that if it's a big lead, it's just a matter of time and you fade them. But where you really take the Phillies, as John laid out, that's pretty good advice, is in this situation, a tight 1-run game or even a tie game, deeper into the game a little bit, past the 3rd inning. Get good value right now by the Phillies, both on the run line and the money line, and you just wait for that big inning. If they put up a 6 spot, let's say, in the 6th inning, that's going to shift dramatically. Now, we already got in at +1, so even if they give up a huge lead, you're getting them at +1. Money line play could be a little bit more in danger if, in fact, they lose the game, but it's all about fading the Phillies. Wow, even money right now for the Phillies at +1. That's not even with a profit boost. Books are begging you right now, +180, begging you. It's moving slightly and slowly, but all right, coming up, we track down Brian Compton, who covers everything NHL-wise for the Islanders. He's been in the league and covered the league for NHL.com as well. Former deputy managing editor of NHL.com, and now the same for the Islanders on the NHL.com site. We'll get his thoughts on a couple of things. What's happened in this series, why it's tied up now 1 game apiece, how close the Islanders actually came to taking a 2-0 lead in this series, and also thoughts going around the NHL if, in fact, it was brought up by anybody from Boston, Tampa Bay, or even in the game that Brian was covering with the Islanders and Flyers, if, in fact, the idea of boycotting was presented. And why, if, in fact, it was, they did not. And again, I am recommending for you out there that the same level of acceptance that you would want from somebody who doesn't understand why the NBA players would boycott tonight we should at the very least allow players and leagues to explain. Not everybody has to fall lockstep. It doesn't mean that the message by the NBA, by the WNBA, by baseball. Look at baseball. Baseball's pretty much split right now. Games didn't stop. This Phillies Nationals game did not stop. It's not going to stop. But we are also, Marlins Mets goes on, Cubs Tigers goes on, Twins Indians goes on, Yankees and Braves are playing the second of their doubleheader today. Other teams are not. And I'm not going to jump all over a team for not doing it, especially a hockey team in the NHL. Brian Compton next. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance. Okay, thanks. Brian's good. I barely heard you. I just want to make sure I heard you right. Awesome. Thank you, John. Shit. I wonder why that's the case, man. Well, few cover the NHL like Brian Compton. And you can follow Brian on Twitter at B. Compton NHL, Deputy Managing Editor, New York Islanders for the NHL, NHL.com. Now, weren't you at one point the Deputy Managing Editor for NHL.com, and now you're with the Islanders? Is that a conflict of interest, Brian? Always appreciate you, your insight, your time, my man. I know this is a huge day for you covering the game that we just saw. Flyers tied up 1-1 in the series. Also in sports, as I'm sure you're aware of what's happening around from Major League Baseball, WNBA, all started by the NBA. And I'm curious, was there any discussion post game? And this is all new to us covering and talking about sports. So I don't even know players focused on the ice if it even got word. But just to ask you first off, was there any discussion or any conversation from players or coaches following the Islanders Flyers game about what is going on outside of the NHL and if at all possible that players wouldn't play? There's a report from Yahoo coming out, and I bring this up, Ryan, because I imagine this is the mentality of anybody in a bubble right now, especially in a postseason situation, where the report says there's a sizable amount of players in the NBA advocating to finish the season out since sacrifices were made to enter the bubble. Now, I imagine without hearing from every single player that's in the NHL playoffs right now, that would probably be the most dominant theory, which is, look, we care, we understand, we're here to push for change, but we also made an incredible sacrifice to be here. Brian Compton joining us on the Dr. Glatt Regrow Your Hairline. Dr. Paul Glatt, Philadelphia's leading hair restoration doctor at B. Compton NHL. As far as the game this afternoon, I would love to just be able to exhale and say, well, that's what the Flyers do, Brian, is you beat up on them one game and they come right back and they handle business. But damn it, this Islanders team is really good. Yep. What's their weakness? Where can, outside of Carter Hart standing on his head, and even still, we saw that's difficult because the Islanders will still find a way to score even when they lose. Where is a weakness that specifically in this series you think the Philadelphia Flyers can exploit? Well, that's the thing is, they get 4 goals today, clearly, and that's enough, especially with the overtime winner. But as you've seen, scoring has not come at a premium, especially from the top line from the Flyers. And that's been the biggest concern. On the flip side, their defense and goaltending have carried them here. But the concern in Philly was, hey, guys, if you can't score, this Islanders team's going to run through you. And I don't know if the Flyers are better off playing a 2-1 type game or if they're better off playing, a high scoring game. It seems like on the opposite end, the Islanders are comfortable playing any type of game. Yes. Yeah, it's getting milk crate time for Giroux, and we love him. Not everybody in the city, but we love him, and he's the captain and all. But it would be nice to see that. I don't know if we've seen a team get even this far in the playoffs without having much, if any, productivity from their top line. And you're right. It's nice to see a couple guys get in there, but still, I mean, if you don't have the usual suspects score, that's what my biggest concern is. It's not Carter Hart. It's not the defense. It's the front. It's the top line not scoring. And that I feel like will undo the Flyers, Brian. Oh. So, Brian, I'm curious because whenever, and I'm sure it happens with the Isle, I'm sure it happens with the Kings, I'm sure it happens with the Canadiens. It's happening here in Philadelphia. We get caught in our own bubble, no pun intended, of course, but we get caught in our own bubble, and the entire city is just fascinated by having a goalie that they can count on. That we haven't been able to say that since I don't know, Bernie Perrant, and now you have Carter Hart. How real? Outside of what Philadelphia Flyers fans think, how real is this kid across the NHL? Does the winner of this series go on and represent the conference? How do you see game three? Knowing what we saw in game one, and even as you mentioned, and rightfully so, Brian, the effort that the Islanders, that was commendable. I hate to say it. Hopefully, Philadelphia isn't listening to me right now, but that was a commendable effort by the Isle to just get back in that game and force overtime. It almost seems like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like despite losing today, they still have the momentum. What's been the key to the success of this league in the bubble? It has been fascinating. Every time you have playoff hockey, it's must watch. And granted, that is main draw of the sport. Oh, it's the best playoffs in any sport. I recognize that. But this year, it feels like we're watching better hockey than normal in the playoffs. What was the last one for you, Brian? I know it's a busy night and truly appreciate anytime we get a chance to chat. At B Compton NHL is how you follow Brian, especially anybody here in Philadelphia. If you want to know why, let's say, the Flyers lose, you should be following Brian because he'll explain it on his Twitter account at the very least. What's been the most disappointing storyline in the bubble for you, if it's a team exit or maybe just a disappointing way in which the team left? Mm. Brian, thanks again, man. I appreciate it and look forward to reading the recap and everything else going on with the Islanders and Flyers. Always appreciate the time and the insight, brother. Be well, and hopefully, all is well with you and yours. You got it. That's Brian Compton at B Compton NHL on the Dr. Glatt Regrow Your Hairline. Dr. Paul Glatt, Philadelphia's leading hair restoration doctor. Man, I've known Brian for a little bit, man, and there are few people that have covered the league and have as much access and insight on the league as Compton does. So appreciate that, especially on a day like today where it's clearly a game day for the NHL, for the Flyers and the team that he's writing for, but also with what's happened around the world and our world in sports. John, thank you so much, man, for producing the show. You are up in 4 minutes. You've got the line change coming your way all across Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, all 6 ways, 7 if you're looking on the stream as well. We have so many different ways in which you can follow along with our programming. We have you covered throughout the night with the line change, John Jansen. Thanks to Brian Compton. Thanks to Ira Silver, who joined us in hour 1. Put up on Twitch. I'll repost it, a couple of clips from tonight so you can see at least my theories and my opinions and my point of views on what's happening in the world of sports, specifically with the NBA. Back on a Monday edition. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, first and foremost. Be healthy as well. What are the odds? Fox Sports Radio, The Gambler, presented by Cure Auto Insurance.